In this video, we're going to take a look at a green ink by Private Reserves, their DC Supershow Green. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below in the description so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen. We do see shading in the stub. We see even better shading in the extra fine, and that better shading holds up very well in the medium. All of these come across as the same tone of green. The extra fine took 15 seconds to dry, while the medium took 26. The scrubby for both do show a little color variation, a little better in the medium, but we get it in the writing. And the smear test, there is a faint chance you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Sailor Riallo with a broad nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. Let's take a look at the second writing sample done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, that's not really bleed, that's where the scrubby is. Very minor ghosting. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen. We do get shading in the stub, in the extra fine, and even in the medium. Now in the medium, I'm going to back up on that halo because I'm definitely seeing some halo happening here in the medium, which until I was really staring at it for the third time, I didn't see. The extra fine the extra fine is just a tad bit darker than the stub. The medium is darker than the extra fine. The extra fine took 23 seconds to dry, while the medium took 49 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, but we are getting spotting of it in the writing. And the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And at the bottom of it, or at the bottom of where the ink is, because it immediately fled up that filter paper, we get a very bright highlighter green, and above that, a very bright highlighter blue. This is the highlighter ink, but I wouldn't use it for highlighting. The one on the right is let dry for 10 minutes before it's dunked in the water, and it looks exactly the same, meaning I don't expect any kind of resistance from this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen. We do get some tone variation by pen. Now the extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, where the medium is much darker than the extra fine or the stub. The extra fine shows some shading, but only a very, very light peppering of it. The B in brown is a little bit darker, the K in quick a little bit darker. The X in fox, the P in jumps, only a few spots. The extra fine took 14 seconds to dry, while the medium took 22. The scrubby of the extra fine shows a little bit of color variation, and that's what we got, just a little bit. The medium shows none, where we got none, and the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it performs well enough. There's no real blowout. I just kind of don't like how that looks when I say well enough. It really does perfectly good for note-taking. I just don't know how I like how that particular looks. Water is reactivating and lifting it, leaving a lot of the white of the paper. Pen flush does everything that water does, nothing more. Same with bleach. It's really hard to do more than removing almost all of it, where bleach is removing all of it. But, as you would expect, it only took water to get this out of my pen. The next writing sample is done on TWSBI notebook paper. No bleeding, minor ghosting. We have no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. We get some tone variation. Extra fine's the same as the medium or as the stub, where medium is much darker, much nicer here, in my opinion, although I don't think this is bad. The extra fine took 17 seconds to dry, the medium took 24. Scrubby for both, they're giving us no color variation. We're not getting it in the writing. In the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, and the realm of normal was 2.1 to 2.9. Private Reserve's DC Supershow Green has a viscosity of 1.75, meaning this is a pretty wet ink. If you're interested in how all that viscosity stuff is done, then down in the description is a link to that video. Let's take a look at the next writing sample done on moleskin paper. Now there's a significant of bleed in, but not bleed through when it comes to the medium. That leads to it having a tremendous amount of ghosting. On the extra fine, we do have a lot of spots where it's coming very deep into the page, not through the page. None of this has come through ruining the next page. I do think with the extra fine you could use the back of the page though. We have feathering. A ridiculous amount of feathering in the medium, although in the extra fine, the feathers are very tiny and I'm going to call it manageable. When you look at the B in brown, very manageable. The F in fox, manageable. The word the, manageable. In the medium, gross. The medium has no spread, but the extra fine spread to about a fine. We have no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine took 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows a tiny bit of color variation, but there's none in the writing. And the smear test, there is a slim chance you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and the realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. Private Reserve's DC Supershow Green has an average dry time of 25 seconds. So if you really like this green, just be patient for it to dry. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. There's a lot of very significant bleed into the page with the extra fine and with the medium. Right here and right here in the medium is where it touched the page underneath. Now, in neither case could you use the back of the page, but I wouldn't use a medium on it because you're going to ruin the page underneath. There is a lot of feathering for both of these. Much more manageable with the extra fine than it is with the medium. The medium spreads to about a broad, the extra fine spreads to about a fine. You can see that the extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the medium. It took 1 second to dry. The scrubby said there should be some color variation, but there's not. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so you don't have to worry about it. Instead of finding inks that look like Private Reserve's DC Supershow Green, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a nice pink ink from Krishna, their Mandara. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Private Reserve's DC Supershow Green? This is a nice, soft, minty green most of the time. It can shade, but only a little bit. I do wish for more. I don't see a need for a bottle of this, but am pleased with the sample that I've used. So there's no mark against the ink. It's more that I have others I very much prefer. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? I don't think it's so much about the nib itself, it's more about the flow of the pen. If you really like that darker tone, then definitely go with a wetter pen. But a medium to dry pen will put down that nice light minty tone. And with the lighter tone, you tend to be able to get a bit more shading. So it's about what you want here. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Diamine's Blue Velvet.